There's a story I've heard, I suspect it is untrue, about a preacher who preached the same sermon at least 3 Sundays in a row, and the church finally decided to get together and ask him what's up with that. And he said something like, well, I know I've preached it 3 times in a row, but until I see that you've gotten it, I'm going to keep on preaching it. I can assure you that this will seem like it'll be the 3rd time in a row you've heard this sermon, but it is actually not as much for you as it is for me. I need to get this and pound these principles into my own head, so you're just watching me as I pound them into my head over and over. I pray that the words that I speak are from God and that they motivate us all to be better servants of His. Why So Serious Part 3. There may be a Part 4. We'll see what happens in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Review. From Part 1, 3 passages that emphasize our need to always be serious and focused in life. If you turn to 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 7, you might want to put a marker there. Ephesians chapter 6, we saw the enemy was not of flesh and blood, and this emphasizes that we need to be very aware. We need to be focused. We need to be serious. This is an enemy we're not used to fighting. And that we need to put on the full armor of God. It's not man's armor, it's God's armor. We can't outthink Him. We can't out-physical Him, anything. 1 Peter 5:8, there's the lion. That speaks for itself. 1 Peter 4:7. 2 things about this at least emphasize that we need to be serious and focused all the time. The end of all things is near. When people come to the end, they get more serious. And so, therefore, be of, the New American Standard says, of sound judgment and sober spirit for the purpose of prayer. Part 2, there were multiple passages that show us that we need to always be serious and focused in life, even in, this sounds silly to say, but even in things which God permits. Actually, we already knew that because we're not supposed to be in things that God doesn't permit. But we're supposed to be serious and focused. So even in things God permits, even in good things, we need to be serious and focused. 2 Corinthians 11:3 from last week. But I am afraid as the certain serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, your minds will be led astray from the simplicity and purity of devotion to Christ. That word craftiness is literally able to do all. Whatever he sets his, we've heard of the person, he can do anything. Whatever he sets his mind to, he can do. Well, that is certainly true of Satan. And then 1 Corinthians 10:23, all things are lawful, but not all things are profitable. All things are lawful, but not all things edify. So, of the group of things that we may do, some of them we just want to avoid. That's what Paul is saying. To break it down in a lovely little chart of things that can be done. You are able to, not permitted, but you are able to do everything. Well, of course, we understand we're not going to do sin. So we get that out of there. And then we understand that we must do some things. I said last week we must assemble. That's one thing we must do. We must help the little old lady across the street, or John Bosworth, if that's the case. And then we think to ourselves, okay, the rest of this we may do. All right, let's have at it. There's something I may do. And they are all, if we're not careful, this is about perspective, they are all of equal value. That's what we think if we're not careful. But Paul is saying, no, that's not true at all. All things are lawful, but not all things are profitable. And so we realize that we have to focus down here. That's where, we don't even look up there. That's generally the idea. Yes, I know that this is permitted, but in my life, because I'm serious and I am focused, and because I want to go to heaven, in my life, there are things that I avoid. You might not avoid them, and you might avoid some other things. But I avoid these things in my life because I have found that they are not profitable for me. We looked at this chart. We referred to further commentary on 1 Peter 4:7, which is where you are. The New King James Version says, the end of all things is at hand, therefore be serious and watchful. It's close. It's coming. It's going to come anytime. You don't know when it'll come. So be serious. Our version, the New American Standard, says, the end of all things is near, so be of sound judgment. That's exactly what this passage is about. If you're serious, that will enable you to be of sound judgment. The word watchful here is the word sober in the New American Standard. This word sober is used 6 times throughout the New Testament. 1 Thessalonians 5:6, let us not sleep as others do, but let us be alert and sober. 1 Thessalonians 5:8, but since we are of the day, let us be sober, having put on the breastplate of faith and love, and as a helmet, the hope of salvation. We saw this in our first lesson when we looked at Ephesians chapter 5. I referred to this passage also. 2 Timothy 4:5, but you be sober in all things, endure hardship, do the work of an evangelist, fulfill your ministry. 1 Peter 1:13, therefore prepare your minds for action, keep sober in spirit, fix your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. And then we've seen this one again. Be of sober spirit, be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. All these passages, what they are saying over and over and over again, is summarized in this uninspired commentary. There are advantages in seriousness of mind. Now we're still in review, but this is a new quote. There are advantages in seriousness of mind. It enables us to take better views of things. A calm, sober, sedate mind is the best for a contemplation of truth and for looking at things as they are. The question that we're dealing with not so much is it sin, although it would apply there, but of all the things that are profitable, of all of those things that are permissible, of all of them, is this one right here really profitable for me? And how do I get to be able to see that more clearly? And there's some judgment here, and I understand through God's plan that the more serious I am in life, the more I will be able to see things that are not profitable and more clearly see the things that are profitable. Gills, intemperance in eating unfits a man for the duties of religion. I think we read this one last week. Satan easily gets an advantage. All immoderate care of the world, which has the same effect upon the soul as surfeiting and drunkenness of the body, it hinders the soul in the service to God, chokes the word, makes it unprofitable. Pulpit commentary says this: the word used here rather points to temperance, abstinence from strong drinks. So that's the literal meaning of the word. And we understand that there's specific application for that. But then there's broader application also, and that's what we've been talking about in lessons 2 and 3 here. Though it suggests also that wariness and cool thoughtfulness, which are destroyed by excess. I want to know what is profitable. I also want to know what I must do and what I must avoid. But assuming I have somewhat of a good grip on that, which is a horrible assumption to make, maybe that's the danger right there, maybe I'm falling a little asleep right there. But whatever the case may be, of all these things that I am able to do, and is available for me to do, of all of them, I want to see so clearly what is actually profitable for this life and for the life to come. Proverbs 23. This is a passage we looked at. We will read it again. Proverbs 23, verse 20, will make the point by an inspired author that the uninspired authors have been talking about. Proverbs 23:20, do not be with heavy drinkers of wine, or with gluttonous eaters of meat. Now you can eat all the meat in the world, and your brain literally will not be affected by, well, maybe a tiny bit. But you just keep on going. That doesn't affect your brain. But look what happens. For the heavy drinker and the glutton will come to poverty, and drowsiness will clothe one with rags. Yes, literally and figuratively also. This word, we said last week, that Plato used this word of Greek soldiers. They had this. By the way, this is our word hypnosis. They were hypnotized. Right there, all by itself, we understand. We don't want that. They had this, but they needed the keenest possible perceptions of sight and hearing. They need to know it. All ears, all eyes, completely aware. And the inspired author says, look, you do too much of that, and it, by itself, there's nothing inherently sinful with eating meat. You do too much of that, and it will lead to your ruin. So I understand that's one of those things that's not going to be profitable. Romans chapter 11, the second passage we looked at last week, we need to see again. Romans 11. The overall context of 9, 10, 11, 12, or 9, 10, 11 is Paul's explaining if the Israelite nation is not being saved, why not? That's the overall argument. Some of them are. Paul is. Many of them are. But not all of them. What happened to those who won't accept God's plan of salvation in Jesus? Romans 11, verse 7. What then was Israel? What Israel is seeking, it is not obtained. But those who were chosen obtained it, and the rest were hardened. That's what he's saying. Look, why didn't they accept the gospel? Because they had hard hearts. Well, the question, that's the short of it. The question, the answer's been given. Why didn't they accept it? They had hard hearts. But he'll prove what he's saying by Scripture, quoting Old Testament. Verse 8, just as it is written, God gave them a spirit of stupor, eyes to see not, and ears to hear not, down to this very day. And David says, let their table become a snare and a trap and a stumbling block and a retribution to them. Let their eyes be darkened to see not, and bend their backs forever. So he says, what happened to those Israelites? Well, they were hardened. And then he quotes passages to prove it. Now, in these passages, we also get to see how they were hardened. Did God do something directly to them? Cover their eyes somehow? Not at all. Verse 9, let their table become a snare. And that refers to everything that they have. You picture the table. You picture the food on the table. You picture the house around the table. You picture the lawn around the house. You picture the fence around the lawn around the house. You picture the barn on the outside of the fence around the lawn on the house. In the nation where they are. And all that they had, they loved. They had their family. They had their position. They had their riches. They had it all. And they loved it so much that when the Messiah came, they said, no, thank you. We would rather have the things that we have right here. So much so that it bent their backs down. It's like they were actually carrying the table. So that's the means. But here's the result. God gave hardened in verse 7 and a spirit of stupor in verse 8. This Greek word, used only here in the New Testament, is used in the Old Testament and other places of an insect bite that dulls the senses by inducing too much sensation. You see that? They've been stung by an insect and they have dull senses now. This is why didn't they see what they needed to see spiritually? Because their senses had become dull. Bedag says stupefaction, the state of being stupefied. Theological Dictionary of the New Testament, used for various states in which the free will of one concerned is more or less obliterated, and they're transfixed on, you're looking over here, but when in reality you need to be looking everywhere. One lexicon, astonishment, insensitivity, numbness, drowsiness, luoanida, a state of not being able to think satisfactorily because of the complete bewilderment and stupor. God gave them a spirit of bewilderment, or God caused them to be completely bewildered, or God made them unable to think. Now here's my point. Everything here that he's talked about was given to them by God. The very things that were given to them by God are the things that caused them, because they allowed themselves to slip into this, to become stupefied. We talked last week about setting your mind on man's interests. Even if what you're looking at is from God, you can look at it the wrong way with your interests in mind, and then you're losing. And it can happen to anyone, at any time, in anything. That's the problem. Even things that are profitable. If we're not looking at them and focusing very clearly, the thing that is profitable for me, I will turn it into something bad. So we need to be on the alert, we need to be serious, we need to be focused, we need to be honest, we need to be ready to cast off anything that is not profitable, and we need to be ready to avoid it. When we realize that is not good for me, might be fine for you, but it's not good for me, I'm going to avoid it. That's what the serious disciple of Christ does. Now, compare and be aware. I'm just going to read. You'll recognize all of these texts. You can get the list from me later if you want. But I want you to do two things. Number one, just listen. Number two, the thing that is being warned about, is it from God? Is it good? And you'll find the answer to every one of them is yes. But yet it is being the thing that's warned about. Good food. Remember, everything created by God is good. That's the word. Do not tear down the work of God for the sake of food. From Romans. Here is somebody who had some food from God, which is a good thing, but suddenly they find themselves having fallen asleep, having fixated too much on the food and not the from God, and this thing that was good for them from God, they allowed to entrap them. Other material blessings. Instruct those who are rich in this present world not to be conceited or to fix their hope on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly supplies. The supply came from God. It's good. But there's a danger. When you have too much of the supply in front of you, you forget about the supplier. And you just look at the supply. It's always about perspective. One of the Proverbs will say, the horse is prepared for battle. Yes, it is. But victory belongs to the Lord. So take reasonable action. You will find yourself in life. And if you're doing life right, all that you will be surrounded with is from God. But even then, you have to be very serious and very focused and have the right perspective. Good worldly things. Demas, having loved this present world, has deserted me. Well, what was wrong with the world? God gave it to him. Good health. Bodily discipline is only of little profit. Is it of profit? Yes, it is. But if that's what you focus on, then what does it say? Godliness is profitable for all things and holds promise for the present life also. So yeah, go exercise, but don't let it become your idol. A good job. He would answer and say to them, the man who has 2 tunics is to share with him who has none. He who has food is to do likewise. And some tax collectors also came to be baptized and said to him, Teacher, what shall we do? And he said, Collect no more than you have been ordered to. Some soldiers will question him, saying, And what about us? What shall we do? And he said to them, Do not take money from anyone by force, or accuse anyone falsely, or be content with your wages. So they had good jobs. Now, the Jews didn't like that they had these good jobs, but those jobs are fine for them to have. They were from God. But yet here's a person who this good job lands in their lap, and I don't know when it happened. Maybe before they received the job, or maybe 10 years after they received the job, but this good job, they allowed it to obstruct their vision of God, and what was good, they allowed to become bad for them. Some people allow some jobs to be all-consuming. I don't steal. I don't take from other people. I don't bully other people in my job. No, I just go from 10 a.m. to midnight every single day. That's all I've ever done for 40 years. They wake up, at the end of 20 years, they wake up and they don't even know who they are anymore. You've seen it. This job, which was a good thing, they allowed to consume them. Good political freedom. Act as free men. Do not use your freedom as a covering for evil, but use it as bond slaves for God. It is legal to covet, but it is not lawful from God. We get that. It is also legal to amass massive amounts of property. But for some people, that will not be profitable. That's the way we have to think. And I have to be one. And maybe you'll amass a whole bunch of property in service to God with Him as the focus, and then after 5 years you suddenly realize, wait a minute, it's been a little while since I've been having the right perspective of what I am legally able to do. Good religious freedom. You are called to freedom, brethren. In this case, freedom from sin and also freedom from the law of Moses. Yes, we don't have to do all of those things. You were called to freedom, only don't turn your freedom into an opportunity for the flesh. For example, you're called to be allowed to eat meat. But don't let the meat become the most wonderful thing in your life. A good spouse. I want you to be free from concern. One who is unmarried is concerned about the things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord. One who is married is concerned about the things of the world, how he must please his wife. Now this is very dangerous. Here's why. A good wife is from the Lord. But it is inherent to being married that you must be concerned about some things of the world. And so you've got to be very careful when you're going through marriage. Yet, here's somebody who received a good wife from the Lord, and for the first 10 years was doing everything wonderfully. My wife is my spiritual helper. And something happened, and suddenly, not only is my wife my spiritual helper, but no longer is my wife my spiritual helper. Now I'm focusing on her only. Or to the point where I put the Lord over here, and I'm focusing on my wife. That's what happens. So here's another situation where God gives you a good thing, but in the end, somebody's done something wrong. Good children. Talking about from Thursday night's class, and Peninnah and Hannah. Hannah had no children. Peninnah had all her sons and daughters. And Peninnah became Hannah's rival. Her rival, would provoke her bitterly to irritate her because the Lord had closed her womb. Yes, the Lord opened your womb, you had children, and next thing you know, this good gift from God has somehow altered your perspective. Somehow that happened. Again, this good thing. Good family. He who loves father or mother more than me. Did God give us a father and a mother? You betcha. He who loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of me. Suddenly I'm elevating my father and my mother and all the rest of my family and not seeing clearly, wait, I need to focus on God and love these, but love God first. Good Christian social friends circle, good Christian friends social circle. I urge you, brethren, to keep your eye on those who cause dissensions and hindrances contrary to the teaching which you learn. Yes, and this includes your brothers and sisters in the Lord. Turn away from them, for such men are slaves not of our Lord Christ, but of their own appetites, and by their smooth and flattering speech they deceive the hearts of the unsuspecting. That's exactly what we're talking about. How can I avoid being the one who is naive, the one who is unsuspecting? That's what we're all talking about here. But notice, they deceive. So you can have, are friends that are Christians good? Yes. Except for the ones who are Christians in name only. So we have to be careful what we're thinking about these people. good knowledge. Beyond this, my son, be warned, the writing of many books is endless, and excessive devotion to books is wearying to the body. Is knowledge a good thing? Sure. But here, you can just spend too much time on it and it wearies your body. That's not even actively wrong. You just got tired. Well, then the problem is, you can't serve God the way you need to. Or, for a negative perspective, knowledge makes arrogant. Now we've just gone over a tipping point. Knowledge, I just pursue knowledge, and my pursuit of it makes me tired. And the negative of that is that I can't serve God the way I need to. And then there's knowledge, if you let it go too far. In the one, I just lost my focus. I pursue knowledge. Okay, but don't pursue it to the point where you can't serve God effectively anymore. Okay, that's one level of how knowledge can influence you. And another level is, I've got so much knowledge that not only am I not effectively serving the Lord, but I've become prideful. And then there are the people who obtain knowledge, always learning, and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Is knowledge good? Yes, it is. Should we be always learning? Yes, we should. But there will be at some point where if we are aware, we will realize, I've been learning a lot, but I'm not learning anything. I've been studying a lot. I've been putting in a lot of time. I've got a lot more facts now than I did 1 year ago. But they're meaningless, worthless, and I haven't actually learned anything of value. Good trials. Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. God gives you the trial. Job nailed it, except for when he didn't. And his wife blew it. Here's a good thing. And if we have the right perspective, great. But the only way to have a right perspective is to have maintained the right perspective. Focus and be serious. Good religion. If you have died with Christ to the elementary principles of the world, why is it that you, as if you were living in the world, do you submit yourself to decrees such as do not handle, do not taste, do not touch, which all refer to things destined to perish with use, in accordance with the commandments and teachings of men? These are matters which have, to be sure, the appearance of wisdom. You will be faked out by this. You'll be duped by this. What is it? You look out at a religious person, and you see their religious tradition, and you say, I like it. If it's not the word that is changing you, then it is not changing you. I know of a young man, some of you know this young man and young woman, who just last year, I think it was, maybe the year before, left the Lord for Catholicism. What? Well, let me ask you something. Did they see the traditions of Catholicism as beneficial after seriously looking at the Word of God? Is that the lens that they saw? I'm looking through the lens of God's Word. I'm a serious and focused Christian, and I've seen Catholicism and its traditions, and that's it. No. I know some folks in Rhode Island who, a couple years ago, 5, 6 years ago, said, we're leaving Rhode Island, this church here, this good, sound, healthy church, we're moving to Maine, and we're becoming Mennonites. What? I know of somebody else, young man, who one day came to church and said, in fact, it'll be out where you are, one young man came to church one day and said, I have decided to become an Islamist. How do you get from being a disciple of the Lord's to choosing the man-made traditions of Islam? I know how. Number one, you don't love the truth, and you're not serious and focused. If anyone thinks himself to be religious, and I would suggest that everybody in this room thinks they're religious. Why? Because the religion it's talking about is you follow the traditions of God formally, ceremonially. I do. We all say, yes, we do. So we need to be especially careful to listen. If anyone thinks himself to be religious, and so they look around and they say, yes, I'm very religious. I even say that. I'm religious. I don't go around saying it very often, But I observe of myself, though, what do you do, Lee? Now listen. And yet does not bridle his tongue. So are God's traditions good? That's a no-brainer. But I can look at these traditions and say I keep them and fall asleep while I'm keeping them and forget about the rest of them. And then there's good speculation. What I mean by this is this. We all have to ask questions while we come to the Word. You know, does it mean this or does it mean that? We did a little bit of that in class this morning. What does it mean? We have to do a little bit of it. And that's good and healthy. Since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. That's verse 20. Yeah, all of us have to look at the world and come up with some ideas of God from just looking at the world. Now, we get the rest of most of the concrete ideas from his word. But everybody here has to look at the world and do some guessing. What does this tell us about God? So there is some speculation. Then look, verse 21. But they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened. You see, there's a way to look at the world the wrong way. There's a way to speculate about the world the wrong way. But yet, God gave us the world and speculation to think about Him. So we need to be careful. We could go on and on. Consider Abraham. By the way, the point of this little the observation of this exercise is this. All of these fall into this category. They're from God. They are good. And what we observe is the one who has those, which is everybody, the one who has those is able to fall asleep in them and even sin in them. And this goes to emphasize two things. Number one, even in them, I must be serious and focused and alert all the time. And number two, if that can happen in what is profitable, then surely I am going to try to avoid with all my heart things that are not profitable. So here's Abraham, an illustration of a human being making a mistake, but doing it right also. In our Thursday classes, we've been talking about Abraham. In chapter 12, we'll just read this one, chapter 12. There's a famine, verse 10. Chapter 12, verse 10. There's a famine in the land. So Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there. Now he goes down there, and his wife is beautiful, and he realizes that the Egyptians do not have morals, they do not have God, they do not have fear of God, and so he understands quite rightly that they will probably kill him in order, or they would probably, they could, it is within them to kill him and take his wife. What he's forgetting about is that God had made him a promise that he would have a child, which means he cannot die. Not in that situation. He cannot die. But when he gets down there, verse 11, it came about, when he came near to Egypt, that he said to Sarai, his wife, "See, I know that you are a beautiful woman. And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife,' and they will kill me, but they will let you live. Please say that you are my sister, so that it may go well with me because of you, and that I may live on account of you." Whoops. No, Abraham. If you're alive, it's because God has allowed you to be alive. And God has made you a promise, which means necessarily you will live through this. But he's in this situation. He's got a little life. A little life happening is what I mean. And what happens? He sees things through the "I'm here on earth" filter. This is the earth filter. In chapter 14, he goes and he fights 4 very powerful kings with 318 men of his own and apparently some others. Well, how does this wanderer fight 4 very powerful kings? Kings so powerful that they beat 5 kings. Kings so powerful that they beat 5 kings, among whom several of these people, there's a nation of giants. How does Abraham beat up the people who beat up them? Verse 20 says, chapter 14, verse 20 says, God Most High has delivered your enemies into your hand. Well, we understand that it was God that was doing the beating up. Verse 20, so Abraham, he's done winning. He comes back with the loot and the people, and he runs into Melchizedek, a priest. Verse 20, he gave him, so Abraham gave to Melchizedek a tenth of all. The king of Sodom said to Abram, give the people to me, because they were his people, and take the spoils or the goods for yourself. And Abraham said to the king of Sodom, I have sworn to the God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take a thread or a sandal thong or anything that is yours, for fear you would say, I have made Abram rich. I don't understand everything, but I know this. In chapter 13, when there was a fearful situation, Abraham had his I'm on the earth blinders on. In chapter 14, in the very similar situation, I'm scared, or at least he should have been, he has the I'm going to see God working in this filter on. Hebrews 11. Talks about Abraham. Verse 8. By faith Abraham, when he was called, obeyed. By going out to a place which he was to receive for an inheritance, he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith he lived as an alien in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, fellow heirs of the same promise. For he was looking for a city which has foundations, whose architecture and builder is God. Do you see the perspective that he usually, or sometimes, enough in the sight of God, looked at his life through? I have life. I've got all these options in front of me. And sometimes he would remember, there's a city. There's a city that I want to get to. Look at all my options with that city in mind. And sometimes, in the very same options, he would forget about the city and make the wrong choice. This is called a heads-up display. Some of you have seen them in real life. What this is a little display that either shoots on a screen in front of you while you're driving or actually onto the windshield. Back in 1991, I had an Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme SL that didn't have it, but the other ones did. It made me very, very upset. Well, what you do is you drive down the road looking through this. So everywhere you go, you're looking at 55. So you never lose perspective of how fast you're going. Here it is on a jet fighter. So you can see out there, you understand where you're going, what you're doing, but you can also see there's a jet fighter in front of that. Here it is at nighttime. Now this illustrates how important it is to use this device, always. This is the perspective that you need to have. You can't see. I'm flying with something else directing me. This is exactly what God is doing. And I got to land. I got to look through the filter. I've got to have the right perspective as I'm coming in for a landing. Those who say such things make it clear that they are seeking a country of their own. And indeed, if they had been thinking of that country from which they went out, they would have opportunity to return. But they weren't thinking of that country, they're thinking of that one. And so when they make decisions, when they're living life, when they have all this good and profitable stuff around them, as long as they keep on thinking of that way, all these good and profitable things will actually be good and profitable. They're always good. He'll allow them to be profitable. Our focus is this. This is our heads-up display. Is it profitable? That's our question. Is it profitable? Why so seriously? This might be the question that you're asking yourself. It's not sin. Yeah, it's not sin. And it's only one time. I get it. Yeah, I wrestle with this, unfortunately, more than I should. That's why I keep on preaching this to me. Consider this passage. This will be the last one for the day. Ephesians chapter 5. The context is making the most of your time. Ephesians 5:15. Therefore, be careful how you walk, not as unwise men, but as wise, making the most of your time, because the days are evil. Lord willing, in 3 weeks, this will be our text. I don't know if we'll get there or not. So then, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. And do not get drunk with wine, for this is dissipation, which means waste. You're wasting your time. The word there doesn't actually literally necessarily mean you're getting tipsy. It just means you're running to excess in whatever you're doing. That is the way you waste your time. How am I wasting my time? Okay. But here's the contrast. But be filled with the Spirit. Okay? So here's our little chart. Here's our heads-up display. Every question we have is, am I being filled with the Spirit? Is this leading me towards being filled with the Spirit? Or is this leading me towards being drunk with wine? That is always the question. What is profitable? What is not profitable? And here is the point. To become drunk, you get there by a little bit at a time. To be filled with the Spirit, you get there the same way, a little bit at a time. You only have time to do a little bit at a time. And that little bit had better be profitable. That's where we need to camp out. I want to be who God wants me to be in this life. In order to get there, I have to choose the things that are profitable. So, it's only a little bit. It's only a little bit. It's not even sin. Okay, so you do a little bit. Was that good for you? Be honest. Now, I know I camp out here way too much. Now, right now, I'm being honest with me. That wasn't healthy. Oh, a little bit more. Because that's where Lee tends to go. Oh, yeah, sure enough, I do some over here. Yeah, no doubt. Y'all do too. Some quotes from recent. Life is a bundle of little things, and the string is always coming untied. Anybody in here live that? That's my life. I saw that. I said, yeah. Now, let me ask you something. Yes, we say, yes, this is my life. Well, how much unprofitable do you need in that? None. Stay away from the unprofitable, right? Here's another one. The world was made out of chaos. That's not true. We're right back where we started. Yeah, that's my life. My life does not need me to add any unprofitable to it. Here's another one. The best time to tackle a minor problem is before it grows up. This is actually about raising children. No, the best time to avoid a problem is before it is a problem in our application. Don't even go there. Why, Lee? Why? It's only a little, Lee. It's only a little bit. It's only a little bit. It's only a little bit, Lee. Am I right? I am right. It's only a little bit. But I want to go there. Why not, Lee? Give me the argument for not. Because I want to go to heaven. I want to be the strongest Christian I can be. I want to take as many people as I can with me. And anytime I dabble in this stuff, it makes me a little bit less of what I could be. And the more I dabble in it, the more likely I am to fall asleep. And a little bit can very easily lead to a lot. It doesn't have to. So I got to be fair here. It doesn't have to lead to a lot. And there will be times when we will plug our nose and plunge into the unprofitable, begging God, God, I've got to, right now I've got to. God, be with me. Help me to stay awake. Help me to be sober-minded and alert while I'm going down into this. because a little bit can lead to a lot. Over the Thanksgiving holiday, I think it was over Thanksgiving, there was a lot of pie going down at our house. So much so that we decided Nikolai gets to eat a lot of pie too. Now you understand that he has diabetes nowadays, and too much pie is bad. A life of too much pie is destructive. Bad things will happen. I'd read you the list of it. You don't want to hear it. He doesn't want to hear it. Including, the more carbs he has, the more insulin he takes, the more his body will become resistant to insulin. That's the deal. And so, for one meal, we let him have, 100 carbs? I don't know, 120, I don't know. It was high. And I forget if I asked Marcy or who it was that asked Marcy. But her reply was about this, why so strict? Why so regimented? Her reply was this: I don't want it to become a habit. And actually, that she was talking about us allowing him. I don't want it to become a habit, because habits are easily formed and very, very hard to break. The last statement: life has many choices, eternity has two. What are yours? Thank you for listening.